the 2024 Republican field for president continues to grow. One person not entering the race is New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu. For more on the GOP fight for the pivotal Granite State, Jennifer Horn joins us now. She is a senior fellow at the University of Chicago and previously served as the chair of New Hampshire's Republican Party. Jennifer, welcome. Thanks for being with us. Your state is at the center of the political world this week with Chris Christie announcing his candidacy there. He placed sixth, though, in 2016 in New Hampshire, and then he dropped out shortly thereafter. So is there any sign that this time will be different?
Right. Well, you know, any election that includes Donald Trump is just so unpredictable. You just can't compare it to any kind of traditional race, you know? So normally you might look at it and say, well, this, you know, Chris Christie has run before, and the folks in New Hampshire, you know, chose not to elect him, chose not to, you know, choose him up near the top of the list. So, you know, how is this time different? Well, what's different this time is January 6th, federal indictments potentially, all sorts of corruption and perfect phone calls that weren't so perfect. You know, there's a lot about this cycle that's different and unique again, just like every other time Trump is involved in a race. So what I think that Governor Christie has going in his favor in New Hampshire is that he has had an entire statewide operation there in the past. They aren't all going to come out and say we're with Chris Christie on day one. We see that he's polling at 1% right now. But some of those folks who were with him back in 2016 will be with him again, and he'll have something he can build on at least.
Does the fact that New Hampshire's governor revealed yesterday that he is not going to run clear the way for someone like Chris Christie? And why do you think that Chris Sununu ultimately decided not to run when everyone else seems to be making the opposite choice?
Well, I think that Governor Sununu made a smart choice here. You know, he talked about you know, wanting there to be a kind of a clear path to be able to defeat Donald Trump. And what we saw in 2016, what really gave Trump the advantage at that time was less, you know, his personality and his, you know, bombastic nature, and more the fact that there were 16 or 17 people in the race. He was able to win several states with about 30% of the vote. So the more the race is, the more crowded the race is, the more that's an advantage for Donald Trump. And I think that Governor Sununu understood that, and that, you know, he doesn't want to see Donald Trump become the nominee. And so, you know, for somebody like Chris Christie, though, he's kind of in a unique position, can sort of create his own lane. We have all these candidates who are afraid to talk against Donald Trump, to stand up to him, to really, you know, be aggressive and assertive. And then we've got this one candidate, DeSantis, who is trying to be Donald Trump. So there kind of might be a lane there for someone like Chris Christie, who's aggressive and assertive and unafraid to attack Donald Trump, you know, head on, and kind of see where it takes you. I'm not suggesting I think that Christie's going to be the nominee, but I think that you know, he's in, compared to all the other candidates, he's in kind of a unique position. So it will be interesting to see how it unfolds.
Is Sununu's decision a sign that moderates are starting to conclude that Donald Trump is essentially unbeatable? And what do you think that his decision is going to mean for someone like a Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, who's still mulling a late entrance into the race?
Well, the polls would certainly suggest that Republican voters, Republican primary voters, don't have any interest in a moderate or a reasonable voice. Or, I mean, look at Nikki Haley and Tim Scott. They're both trying to be positive and upbeat, and, you know, bring a more you know, a more positive outlook to their campaign messaging. And they're both stuck in single digits as well. When you have a candidate like Donald Trump polling nationally over 50%, it's not enough to say, hey, I think I could be a good president. You have to be willing to really fight and say why this other guy is not. As long as the candidates are afraid to confront Trump, he's the guy. It's going to go to him no matter what.
Right. And yet New Hampshire is in such a unique position because it's the first in the nation state primary for Republicans. And Chris Sununu, while he is moderate, he's quite popular in New Hampshire. Right. So what kind of weight would his endorsement have in that pivotal state? And who do you think he might back?
He's very influential with Republican voters in the state of New Hampshire. There's no question about that, and his endorsement will be very valuable. I wouldn't dream of trying to guess what his plans are for the future. And frankly, he may not have a thought yet about who he would endorse. Republicans like Chris are in kind of a tough situation. You never want to endorse somebody that you know isn't going to win strategically. On the other hand, he's certainly not going to endorse Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis. So, or at least I wouldn't think that he would endorse Ron DeSantis. He's just not enough different from Trump. Normally, I would expect him to endorse somebody like a Tim Scott or a Nikki Haley. I'm not sure, what he'll do though in this cycle. It's all very unusual again.
It is quite unusual. You talked about how Chris Christie is so much more comfortable than a lot of the other GOP candidates when it comes to going after former President Donald Trump.
Right.
Most of them are choosing instead to go after the current president, Joe Biden. Let's take a listen.
Right.
Our leaders are failing us, and no one embodies that failure more than Joe Biden.
Our nation, our values, and our people are strong, but our president is weak.
Our great American comeback starts by sending Joe Biden back to his basement in Delaware.
Jennifer, do you think that GOP voters are ultimately going to be judging these candidates based on how hard they're willing to go after Joe Biden?
No, I really don't. I mean, primary voters always want to know that you're able to go after your opponent. And of course, Republican primary voters want to hear you beat up the Democrats and the other way around as well. But again, in order to get there, you've got to defeat the guy who's got the 20 or 30 point lead in the primary race. So I'm certain that primary voters love to hear this rhetoric from their candidates. However, it's not enough right now to just go after Joe Biden. That's assumed that you're going to be against Joe Biden. What they need to hear are these candidates going after Donald Trump. And if they can't make a mark on Trump, then they're never going to get the chance to make a mark against Joe Biden.
And that'll be an especially interesting dilemma for someone like Mike Pence, his former running mate, who is expected to get into the race in Iowa tomorrow. Jennifer Horn, the former chair of the New Hampshire Republican Party, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.